Hello. In this episode, we focus on gender and human capital inequality. There's a human capital gender gap, a significant one, and it has significant consequences. So first of all, young females receive less education than young males in nearly every low and lower middle income developing country. And so closing an educational gender gap that we have is important in part because the social rate of return on extra education for females is likely to be greater than the social rate of return for additional extra education for males, for at least 4 reasons. One of them has to do with ability and subsequent productivity. We'll look at it this way. We suppose that the most capable students are enrolled first. That is to say, the likelihood in a developing country of a child going on after finishing their 8th grade on to secondary school is likely to be correlated with ability. So that, for example, if 75% of the boys are going on and at least beginning high school, but only 50% of the girls are doing so, then it's likely that the next girl to go on and start high school will have higher ability than the next boy to do so, to go on and start high school, just because distributions of ability are the same. So this has to do with the ability of those able to continue their education. Also, education, as we've seen, increases earnings substantially and importantly so. It's found throughout the developing world that mothers, that is to say the girls, when they become adults, provide a larger fraction of their income to child welfare, health, education, nutrition, than do fathers. So there's greater benefits for children, and so in this way, ultimately, bigger benefits for economic development. Mother's knowledge gained through school, even without extra income, we've also seen will help child survival and education. And so that education for women increases productivity, hence increases earnings. That means a higher opportunity cost of time and thereby lowers fertility. Also, generally, education for females helps break, for these reasons, the vicious cycle of poverty that affects families. The good news here is that parity is being approached, though not quickly enough. There is progress here in all of the developing regions. An example is the youth literacy rate. Not long ago, there was substantial, more substantial than this, disparity between female and male literacy. This has greatly been reduced as some regions of the world have approached among youth full literacy. And in fact, in the Latin America and Caribbean region, there's now a slightly higher fraction of females than males among youth who are literate for youth literacy. There's still a gender gap in MENA, Middle East and North Africa, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. But overall literacy has improved over the years, significantly so in all of these regions, and in the process the gender gap has begun to shrink as well. Turning to inequality in education a little bit more in depth, we can use Lorenz curves for education to compare what's going on for females and males. Here we have the case of India. This is data taken from surveys, household surveys. And so in this case, though, we consider all of the education for females and all of the education for males separately. As a result, we can determine Lorenz curves for education among females and those among males. So this light blue being the Lorenz curves for males, we can see that this shows a smaller level of inequality among males. This is the Lorenz curve for females. It is bowed out more a key driver of this, similar to what we saw before, here we have almost, or even a little bit more than double the fraction of females who have not been to school than males. It looks like it's a little over 40% never having attended school for females, and a little less than 20% for the case of males. So this is another way of examining the matter of inequality. There's also a correlation between under 5 mortality and mothers' education. Regardless of earnings, we now compare mothers with no education, some primary, complete primary, and some secondary, and completed secondary, some higher than secondary. And there's a strong relationship in that the deaths per 1,000 live births is uniformly lower the more the educational status for the mother. Then we have the missing women's crisis, which is one of the strongest manifestations that we can see of gender inequality. Nothing more substantial than the females not there at all. And so research concludes that in Asia, at least 100 million women are missing, a term that was first introduced by Amartya Sen. So the idea here is that if gender ratios were closer to normal levels, that is to say, based on biology, and in comparison with areas like Western Europe where there's not gender bias and so on, then this is the minimum number of additional women who would be alive in Asia, 100 million. A recent estimate, globally, 126 million women missing. These numbers are still rising. They're currently projected to be about 150 million missing women by 2035. Some women are also missing in sub-Saharan Africa, a smaller proportion. Reasons for this include inferior medical care for girls, as we've talked about before, these postnatal factors, but also now gender-selective abortion and even continued female infanticide. Here are some of the percentage numbers. This is the estimated percentage of women missing in the proportional terms as I've just described. In India, more than 10% of women are estimated to be missing, based upon what you would otherwise expect. Also in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and China, there's about 8% of women missing, and over 4% in Bangladesh. There is some of this problem in sub-Saharan Africa as well. It's much smaller than the case of Asia, a little less than 2%, however, women missing in sub-Saharan Africa as well. Overall, I'll just wrap up by noting that there has been very significant progress on improved human capital parity if you follow this over the last few decades, and in particular progress on female educational attainment, including in higher education. A striking fact is that in some upper middle income countries, it's now the case that that on average in some of these countries, more females are attending and finishing college than males, similar to a pattern that we've seen in some high-income countries such as the United States. I'm just going to wrap up now with a couple of discussion questions for you. The first one is, think about it, how would you go about creating a Lorenz curve for health inequality that was analogous to the one for education inequality that we've looked at in the last couple of episodes? Another discussion question: do you think there are risks of new forms of inequality emerging, both gender-related or otherwise, as technology and societies continue to develop?